Friends, last week we started building an old industrial warehouse from Styrofoam. It'll be a part of my next diorama, but we've only sculpted the main structure, painted the cinder blocks and concrete, and added the plastered walls. Tonight we're gonna pick up where we left off and add the remaining details, so let's better jump right into it, shall we? And we'll get the most boring job out of the way first. The back and side of the building need to be laminated with thin wooden veneer. This will blend it nicely with the side walls of the diorama and make the overall presentation look more professional. So that's already taken care of, and the building looks much better now, even from behind, especially considering the cut I've made here didn't look so great. Let's now get to the fun parts. The row of large industrial windows will be completely scratch-built from styrene strips. I bought them for my Bears Crossing diorama and they're one of the most useful materials to have at your disposal. I was too lazy to buy angle profiles in advance for this diorama, so I had to make them myself like this. Building the window frame would have been much quicker, but even this wasn't as painful as I anticipated. However, I'm definitely buying some angle profiles from Evergreen very soon. Okay, for this next part I needed several identical lengths of styrene, and the chopper from Northwest Shoreline is the right tool for this task. The reason for this? Well, to make the window look authentic, they have to be glued in between the frame, not to the frame from behind or whatever, but directly between the top and bottom frame. Then I just gave everything a smooth coat of diluted Tamiya putty to fill any gaps and whatnot, and to also give the part a very minute texture. A quick check if everything fits into the styrofoam building, and I think we're good to proceed. Painting means priming as the very first step. A black primer is a preferable option here because with styrofoam buildings I often have to play a game of fake shadows, and this primer is ideal for that. Next up, a generous coat of whole red for that nice, dark, rusty base coat. I didn't spray it from the other side because, like I said, a game of shadows. Fake shadows. I opted against using chipping fluid and rubbing the paint down because the entire part is very fragile, and instead I did something like reverse chipping, applying the pale blue paint in these irregular patterns, leaving some of the rusty undercoat showing through here and there. Some additional texture was added by painting small patterns of even lighter paint, making the weathering look more three-dimensional, so to say. This will give us a good foundation for enamels. And actually, we don't have to mess around with these too much. Just a pin wash made from winter streaking grime to emphasize those few details that I added, and then, of course, enhancing the chipping effects and the paint texture with very small amounts of streaking rust effects. Let's now make the glass from thin acetate foil. It's a very flexible material because it looks just like real glass. It can be painted and cut very easily. It's flexible both literally and figuratively, and you can also make cracks, preferably from the inner side. They look better that way. PVA glue is the best option here because super glue can and often will leave a visible misty surface when it dries, but actually, misting them with a thin coat of flat varnish ain't such a bad idea if you want dusty windows. Again, ideally from the inner side. On the outside, that's where I added actual streaks and accumulations of dirt and whatnot, using light mud from Vallejo. I struggled to blend acrylics over acetate foil smoothly, but it turns out that acrylic thinner works best. So that's the finished window, and it was a lot of fun. It ends with a glass piece, which is kinda scary and hard to blend in, but let's see. Okay, so here it is glued in place. I used copious amounts of PVA to fill gaps between the window and the building, and I think it looks pretty nice. Okay, next. These were made from copper foil. I've bought a large roll of the stuff from eBay, and I think it's 1 meter long and 0.1 millimeter thick, and it cost about $10, an absolute steal, my friends. Now, metal is a very specific surface when it comes to painting, and in my book, it means priming it with a dedicated primer for metal. Of course, followed by my beloved black primer. The first one makes the metal behave like plastic when it comes to accepting paints. And because I wanted the seals to have the same finish as the windows, I applied the same techniques. This meant the rusty undercoat and applying the faded paint with a paintbrush and the reverse chipping thingy again. It's not as easy when the painted surface is bigger, but hey, it's a great opportunity to sharpen your skills with such an unusual painting approach, isn't it? And because there's no surface detail here, I didn't have to apply any pin washes. Just quick rust wash on top of those chips, just like before, and the job was done. I glued them in place with PVA glue and made sure to make them look a bit wobbly, each one pointing in slightly different direction. Alright, so that's the entire window section done and dealt with. I expected it to be the most frustrating part of this project, but it was more rewarding than frustrating. Next! This was the most frustrating part, most likely because I didn't choose the best approach, but let me try to explain. So, here I'm making a bending jig from plastic. This part of the roof is called a gable, right? Yeah, well, on the real thing, the gable is made from corrugated, zinc-plated metal. I think it's zinc-plated. Copper is very hard to bend into such a complex shape, but it can be softened by annealing. Heat it up until it turns into a rainbow and you can bend it like paper. However, it's still a pretty sturdy material for the job, and this task wasn't very pleasant. Not impossible, just not fun, and I should have chosen a different material and method. But we'll get to that once I start working on the roof. But for now, I had to meticulously press and bend it over the plastic template. And here comes the advantage of having a cutting template as well, as I can just flip it to the other side and chop off the excess foil. This would otherwise be a messy job and I would destroy the corrugated surface. Some cleanup was necessary to get rid of the ugly chopped off edges, and I could add the small details. Those are actually just bolts, that's the only detail I needed to add, and I made them from two parts. 1mm circle for the washer and a 0.7mm circle for the bolt itself. A quick dry fit if everything is nice and stuck, and we can start spraying. The first two steps are the usual ordeal: a nice thick coat of metal primer, followed by a nice thick coat of black primer. This time, however, it's not a base for a rusty finish. Instead of whole red, I sprayed the entire part with silver from AK's 3rd generation range. It's water-based acrylic paint, so instead of my favorite Mr. Leveling thinner, I had to reduce it with regular acrylic thinner, the one from VMS in my case. Then I gave it a coat of flat varnish to knock that beautiful metallic sheen down a notch. The real material would get also dulled down by the elements over time. Surprisingly, the only weathering job I had to do was applying a pin wash. Well, in this case it was more of a wash and a dirt pass at the same time, because I applied the streaking effect very generously. That's because I wanted to emphasize the corrugated surface, every bend, nook and bolt, but also to add heavy dirt accumulations towards the bottom. Nothing spectacular, but it gets the job done, I can tell you that much. But of course, after I painted the bolts with dark rust from Vallejo, I blended some enamel rust around them, like a second round of wash. This creates a beautiful contrast with the shiny metallic surface. Once that was done, I could happily slap the gable on the building, again holding it in place with PVA glue, and feel really good about my life situation. But let's now take those lessons I learned and apply them to the roof. Alright, so here I made a bending jig, but this one seems more purpose-built, right? As if more thought and experience went into it. And that's because it did. And I also ditched the copper foil and instead opted for pewter or tin foil, which behaves like rubber, if it was made from metal. The point is, it's very soft and can be bent into the weirdest of shapes. It's also pretty heavy because it probably contains lead and stuff. Anyway, chemistry aside, it could be bent with our finger force for sure, but I wanted to play it safe and use this miniature vise for a good measure. The result? Excellent corrugated metal. I had these panels finished in no time and could happily slap them on a base cut from plastic. That's because I could keep the roof removable, yet at the same time paint it as a single piece. Another advantage of pewter, it's very soft, and I could very easily trim it to the exact shape of the building. No brute force is necessary in this chapter. Detailing was once again directed by nuts and washers made from plastic, and I also added a metal vent pipe because it acts as a vertical element on the building, and also because I've drawn it in my sketch, and I always follow my sketches. It comes from this 3D printed set by RT Diorama, an excellent product by the way. Okay, painting. Same old metal primer, even samer and older black primer, and once again acrylic silver from AK. and in the most unexpected plot twist in history, a coat of flat varnish, just like on the gable. I mean, they're both made from the same material, and oh, by the way, VMS made the best flat varnish on earth even better by packing it in a giant 100ml bottle. His name is Matt. But that's where the similarities end. The roof is exposed to more elements, in fact it's the most exposed part of the building, so I started by spraying a diluted mixture of German grey and buff from Tamiya into the recesses. That's supposed to be the crusted accumulation of dirt and grime collected over the years. And then, the most enjoyable part, adding the corrosion with an airbrush. This is diluted flat yellow with a drop of hollow red from Tamiya, reduced with leveling thinner. And here's the kicker, if you're not an airbrushing guru and your spray gun sputters, well, that's awesome, because it makes the rust spots look even more realistic, almost as if you made them with the aid of chipping fluid. But seriously, this part was really enjoyable, and as with everything, reference pictures were of great help here. I was so pleased with the result that I wanted to leave it like this, but there's always room for improvement. For example, according to my references, I added darker stains of rust in the middle of each rust spot. I used Rust Dark Shadow from Life Color's Dust and Rust acrylic set. That's an excessive use of the word rust, I know. And then again, a pin wash from diluted Winter Streaking Grime. This wasn't used just to make the bolts pop, but also to visually separate the panels from each other. Something like a fake shadow, because Styrofoam buildings are a game of fake shadows, remember? And after that, I could once again very happily slap the finished product on the warehouse. It fits like a glove and it has a nice contrast with the gable. Each part is exposed to the elements differently, and as such, it should also have a different finish, even though they're both made from the same materials. The remaining details are courtesy of RT Diorama again, namely the rain gutter, which is very nice and sturdy, but I find it a bit bulky. You often have to make 3D details a bit oversized on purpose. I know that from my own 3D modeling experience, but not this much IMO. On the other hand, these fuse boxes are a work of art. You get all kinds and shapes, some are closed, some are open, one is dented like it was pried open, just pure excellence. Nice job, RT Diorama. Here's how I implemented them into the building. I didn't film the process because it was the same repetitive stuff all over again. Primer, base coat, pin wash, dry brush with dark rust, and some enamel rust washes. The lamp is my own 3D model, by the way, and you can download it amongst other details on my Patreon page. And the cables are just 0.4mm LED wires. So anyway, my friends, that's the old industrial warehouse finished. I personally totally love industrial buildings. In fact, I love them so much that I'm remodeling my house in this industrial style. And yes, that includes exposed electric cables nailed to the walls and everything. But anyway, this neglected structure is just a part of the upcoming diorama that I'm working on right now, with a rusty Conqueror Mark II. I'm not gonna spoil the setting of the diorama, although you can probably guess how it's gonna look by now, and it's gonna be massive. A really big scene with lots of textures such as concrete, dirt, vegetation, junk, you name it, it's gonna be there. However, it's gonna be a lot of work, and I probably won't be able to access my studio for a few days because the contractors are coming to completely tear down my bathroom and hallway, and there will be a lot of dust and rubble everywhere. Because of that, I'm gonna skip 1 week so I can deliver you the best product I possibly can without cutting any corners. Sounds good? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and hopefully learned something new. Thank you for watching, and thank you to my awesome patrons who make this show possible. If you like what I'm doing, want to get more of it, and in return support my work, you can go to my Patreon page and see what kind of reward would you like. I'm posting there almost every day with updates from my workbench. We can get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. I'm posting 1 week early ad-free videos, although there ain't one this week. I also have some small 3D models for detailing your projects, a bunch of reference photos from the real world if you need inspiration for old buildings, landscapes and so on, and these beautiful studio photos which you can download in full resolution. Alright, friends, I gotta say Styrofoam buildings are really fun. They're my second favorite thing, the first one being tanks obviously, but they're so fun I wouldn't even mind making a standalone building here and there. Or just the front wall of a building as a quick 3D picture or something. How does that sound? Anyway, you all stay safe, stay awesome, build your models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!